Hi guys, you're welcome to the CSS Spacing lesson. In this lesson, we will be looking at CSS units, CSS margin, CSS borders, and CSS padding. You will learn the basic fundamentals and which one to use at the right time. So let's dive in and get learning. So the objective of this lesson is that by the end, you should know what CSS units have, know how to use CSS units for responsive design, know the CSS units that suits fonts and width, and also know the difference between CSS margin and padding. So we'll start with CSS units. What are CSS units? CSS units are used to specify the size of a property or tell it that how CSS unit works in different ways. Sometimes you are increasing the size, sometimes you are adding a color or something like that, but most times CSS units relates with size and other stuff like that. So that's just basic on this, just like in mathematics when you are adding a unit to something. So depending on the unit you are giving to that, your calculation in mathematics determines what you are working on. So likewise, CSS units, when we are working with fonts, there's a unit that we use, or there are different kind of units we use. I said here that a good example is when you want to increase the size of an element. You give it the property of font size, then followed with your value. The value given to this element also includes the units of the value. As you know, when you say, okay, I want to increase the font size of my paragraph tag, and you say you want to increase it to 32 what? Of course, you put a unit, pixel, rem, m. By the time we get to that, you understand. So we have categories of CSS units. There are two categories of CSS units, namely absolute units and relative units. So let's see the difference. Absolute units, these are units that are fixed. They are fixed irrespective of the window size or the parent element you are using. If you set your paragraph tag to be a font size of 32 pixels, it will be the same on the phone, on a laptop, on an iPad, and all like that. They are fixed, they don't change regardless of the device you have that a user is viewing your website in. So absolute units are good for use when responsive units is not important. But I bet you want your web application to be responsive. You want people to be able to view your websites or web application on phone, on laptop, on an iPad, and all like that. So now let's see what the reason why it's not good for responsive design is because by the time somebody is viewing your websites on a phone, on an iPad, they don't scale to the screen size when they change when you are using absolute units. So now we have examples, pixel, points, and all like that. Of all the absolute units, pixel is the most that is frequently used for screens, while others are good for prints. So we'll be using more of pixel in our CSS. Now, relative units. Unlike absolute units, relative units scale to their parent or window size. This makes relative units very useful for styling responsive websites. What I'm saying here is, unlike absolute units we discussed earlier, this one scale to their window size. If somebody is viewing your website on a phone, it will automatically scale. If it's on a laptop, it will scale. If it's on an iPad, it will scale. No matter the screen size, it will scale because it is not fixed. Absolute units are fixed, but relative units are not fixed. And here we have different types. I brought out the three major ones that are often used: the percentage, the M, and the rem. The percentage is often used when we are setting width. You understand? We want our width to be responsive. One thing about CSS is by default when you're starting to style your CSS, your HTML, it is responsive. But it is when you start adding one or two things, you start to move. So we'll see how to handle that. And we can also use the M to declare a font size. It is always relative to the font size of the parent. And then we have the rem, which is the short, which is short for rem, root m. That is rem root m, because it's always relative to the font size of the root of our page, and we all know that the root of our page is our HTML tag. So others that you can read on are the viewports units, which the VH means viewport height, viewport width, viewport mean, and then viewport max. So you can read on that. So now we move to CSS spacing. I want to get done with the theoretical aspects, and then we'll move to the coding in the next video. So in CSS, we have what we call the box model. It is literally how elements are arranged in a box. Every HTML element is like a box. You know, your P tag, your header tag, your footer, even your inline element, both block and inline element, they are like a box. So, and this helps us to have an idea that, okay, if I want to put this here, I want to put this here. I want to give this a space, I want to give that a space. So that is what CSS spacing is all about. And every element is like a box, and this helps us nest our elements within. Once we know it is a box, oh, it's a box, I can put my paragraph inside my div, I can put a heading tag and all like that. So let's continue. The CSS has a good number of properties that we can use to arrange and space our HTML elements. Some of these properties are padding, margin, and borders. So what is a padding? Be like, okay, what's padding, what borders, you understand? So padding is a property used to create space around the content of an element, which is at your content. Remember, your content is inside your tag. Let's say you have a paragraph tag, your content is inside it, so you are creating a space around that content. Let's say you have a paragraph tag of I am a boy, you are creating a space between that I am a boy. For example, you might want the content inside your paragraph element to have more space around it. The padding property is the innermost part of the CSS box model. This is just a hack. Padding helps you to add space inside the element. How you even know that you are adding space inside the element is when you have a background. By the time I'm demonstrating this in code, you will understand better. And this is how you declare padding and all like that. So margin. The CSS margin property is used to create space around an element outside a defined border. Usually it is used to create space between two or more elements. The margin property is the outer part of the CSS box model. Like we said, the CSS box model is just like the box. So the padding helps to add space out inside, while margin helps you to add space outside your element. Remember, padding inside, margin outside. By the time we start writing code, we see this very well. And thanks. So you know what's enough of the talking. Let's move down to our code, and you see. So this is the part 1 of the CSS spacing video. So the part 2, we'll open our VS Code, and then we dive straight up to code and see what we have been talking about. See you in the part 2 of this video.